everyone, and welcome to another podcast. My name is Lucy Challenger and I'm the CEO of Polo and Tweed. And welcome to the Voice of Luxury, where today I am joined by Chris Wilson. Hello Chris, how are you?
Very well, thanks Lucy. Yourself?
Very well, thank you for asking. Now, for everyone who's tuned in today, Chris joins us as an entrepreneur and investor, and he has an incredible career to date and has a passion which many of our listeners might also have, and we're going to explore more about this. So, Chris, I thought you could dive straight in and you could give us a little bit about your background, perhaps your career, some highlights of it, and what your main passion and hobby is.
Well, I'll try and summarise it and keep it fairly brief if that helps. But my background originally is in the technology space. So back in the mid-90s, I think now, with a very good friend of mine, James Murray, we formed a company called Alternative Networks to capitalise on the deregulation of the market between BT and Mercury, as was at that time. The reason we set our own business up is we both wanted to have some nice cars at one day, and we couldn't afford those having regular jobs. So this bizarre have a goal but work hard to achieve it was the aim. And we set the company up in our mid-20s, I guess it was at the time, and had an incredible run over the next 10 years. We IPO'd it in London on the AIM market in 2005, and then several years ago recently it got sold off to private equity, or a company backed by private equity. I stepped away from the day-to-day of it in around about 2005, and since then I remained an investor in that business, and I've been an investor in a number of other businesses for 10 years in Australia when we were overseas, and then over here, but majorly focusing on property and other event businesses.
Okay. So obviously we're going to talk about the fact that you worked because you enjoyed your work, but also because you had passions about cars and wanted to further your car collection, as it were. And as we were talking about, before we pressed record, as it were, one often is linked to the other. We have to work hard to get success in life. We have to follow our dreams. But often if you're passionate about something, and in this case, cars, they can be pricey. So what sort of led you in from being just as someone who buys a car to get to A to B to then buying cars because you really were passionate about what you were buying?
I think it's a difficult question. I think most people in most hobbies I know, those passions are seeded at an early stage in your life. And for me, they were probably seeded as a teenager. You stumble across things that just somehow they talk to you. And you think, okay, I want to get involved in this, but how? And one goes and spectates and watches, and you just sense that this would be great to get involved with. But at that point in my life, it was such a distant dream, so totally unattainable to go racing cars or anything else, that I just spent some time when I was at college looking for jobs at the time then, where I could work and be close to things. And it was that experience where I was working for a garage at the weekends whilst I was at college, helping them wash and clean cars and things, when it suddenly just the penny dropped, and I saw that most of the people that were buying these things, which at the time were TVRs and Lotuses and Porsches, the vast majority had their own business. And it just struck me at that point that rather than a career at the time, I was going to go and join the army and go to university and all that, I thought, no, hang on, that's not going to work. I might get to drive a tank, but nothing else. So I then thought, clearly I've got to go and figure out how to start a company at some point. And then I embarked on that journey. And I guess the car goal just got parked at one point because we had to go and make the business work first. And then when the business worked, we were able to go full circle and say, right, now we can at one level afford to play and indulge. And that's what then followed. I take the car passion as seriously as I do the work passion. It really is a deep passion, and I enjoy racing, and you can't go about that lightly, I think.
No, absolutely. And my husband's very much into cars, and he would like to collect them, although I keep stopping him. And I think one of the things which really strikes me is that when I look at people who collect cars or who have a passion for cars, it's so specific in the detail of the specific car. Just because it's an expensive car doesn't make it a collectible car. And I think that's where me, as someone who doesn't understand it, comes to play. And I think, well, what makes this specific Porsche more expensive than a new Porsche, for example? So how did you begin to learn about this? Because if someone's listening and thinking, I would love to start buying the right kind of car, making the right investment, how do you even begin to educate yourself in that area?
I think it's a constant process. And I think the weird thing, the addictive part's the journey, not the destination. And so often, like with many things in life, you get to a goal you've set yourself, and then inevitably you see more goals and challenges. And I think it's the same with the car. So when the first car I wanted, significant car was a 911 Porsche, which I was probably late 20s when I got there, and it was everything to me. I was so over the moon after years and years of working and dreaming. But then no sooner you got it and enjoyed it, you start thinking, well, actually, I wouldn't mind trying this version or that version, or actually, if I could re-specify, I'd do this with it. And it's that constant search for the next thing and where it takes you. And I think it's a bit like wine. You might go, I like red wine, but then you say, well, do you like a Burgundy or a Bordeaux? And then you say, well, which vintage and what years and which vineyard? And it just gets deeper. The more you look at it, the hobby gets deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
And you tend to follow your curiosity. And I think that's where I've gone. And it's I've learned from so many people and mistakes, and I've restored cars, and I've bought and I've raced cars and moved them all around the world. And you're just constantly learning, and from other people and from the market and those you're sharing the hobby with, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess part of that process is also potentially making mistakes and learning from those mistakes when you perhaps buy or do work on a car and then lose money when you sell it, or make the wrong investment as opposed to making the right investment. And I think one of my questions would be, so if someone's listening to this and thinking, okay, I really would love to get into buying the right car, where should they go? Should they be trolling the internet for YouTube videos? Should they be buying magazines? What should that teenager or young adult be thinking of doing next to get that education that you talk about through that process of your own life that you've been through?
I think it's interesting. If you look at, there's a number of reports done on luxury assets. Knight Frank do one every year, Credit Suisse do one every year. And I think in luxury assets, whether it's collectibles, art, cars, sculpture, wine, coins, whatever, the number one factor, if you're looking at it with the investment piece, which you put there, is you've just got to buy what you love and are passionate about, because there's no guarantee with anything in life. And if something's gone down in value, well, you better love it, because then you've got a real problem.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the first rule. And generally, if you really love something and understand why you love it, there's a good chance somebody else does. Whereas if you're only buying it because you think there's an investment potential in there, you're missing it. All these things are driven by passion. I don't think anybody buys any of these luxury assets, or very few people buy it as a purely speculative investment. I mean, people do, but generally that doesn't work out very well. I think most people I know who are astute collectors in the car world apply that first. The number one thing is you pay the right price when you buy something. Don't get carried away necessarily. And you've got to also, there's very rarely a short-term trade in these things. I think one has an eye on where trends are going. So, I think I'm always looking at it, what I think is happening in 3 to 4 to 5 years' time, which might change things and therefore create a wider appeal to something I'm buying now.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Because it's the long term, isn't it? It's not buy something and flip it 2 months later for more. Although I'm sure there are some cars you can do that with. It's sort of understanding how the markets will change, and then I guess an element of guesswork as well as an element of knowledge comes into it.
I think it does, and I started from a point. I'm not a car dealer, so
yeah, sure.
that is absolutely not the case. But equally, one doesn't like to lose money, so you're trying to always think about how do you manage that. And I started from a point of view going, I want to go racing, so I did that, and then you realise racing is horrendously expensive. You're doing it seriously. So one thought, hang on, how do I mitigate the cost of doing that? And I think that's where I thought actually race cars are an interesting proposition. And if one can find an interesting car, restore it, make it competitive, bring it to public attention, and then have that journey with it. If you've had good results and success and people have seen it, then actually you can come out the other end of the whole thing and somebody else wants that journey.
Yeah.
And that's where I came at it from. And so I often look at, how, like everything in life, how do you add value? How do you buy a business and add value to sell it again? Or how do you buy a property, refurbish it to add value and sell it again? And I think with the car, a lot of the restorations I've done over the years have been things where I've seen in a car, like an old racing car, which I've then be able to buy as a bit of a weapon that's just destroyed, looking very sad, hasn't run for 15, 20 years. And how can we restore it, make it really beautiful, bring it back to the attention, enjoy using it, and then at that point you can sell it. And where I see a dusty old relic that's got potential, 5 years later, it's a beautiful, beautiful car
Wow,
at Goodwood Festival of Speed or something.
that's so
And
cool.
someone sees it and goes, I want that now. They haven't got that ability and the patience to see through the pain of restoring a car.
Yeah,
To
yeah,
get
yeah.
that.
No,
So,
no, absolutely. And it's funny about you talking about racing being expensive, because I used to do a lot of track days on motorbikes. So I used to ride my Ducati 996 and do track days with my husband, well, before he was my husband. And then
both your arms and both your legs. Brilliant.
and then we got invited to do a track day in the car, and I'd never done a track day, so it was a sort of a private event, and we went along, and we had a 911 at the time, and we had fun, and I was driving around, although I found it very odd because I was used to being on a bike rather than in a car. And then after the track day, my husband said to me, okay, so now we have to replace all the tires. And I said, excuse me, and that was a very expensive day out just for a bit of, a couple of hours of fun around the track. But, I had no idea that there was so much. It's naive, I know, but there's so much that goes into just a fun day out of a track day, which I then got a hard lesson after we took the 911 around the track. But Chris, you mentioned about Goodwood, and I mean, I've been to the Festival of Speed, I've been to lots of different car events. What's your involvement with those? Do you go to them regularly? What sort of things do you do when you go to them?
I think the way I look at it is I'm not a professional racing driver. I had this view that I wanted to. There's boxes I wanted to tick. It's a bit like a mountain climber. I want to go and climb the 7 summits. And in the racing world, I've chosen to race in mainly historic cars, because if you go racing modern cars, you're up against young guys and girls who are looking to try and make careers out of this. And I can't compete against a 20-year-old or 19-year-old or someone who's testing and racing all the time. So I've deliberately gone for classic events.
Okay.
And I wanted to do the things that captured my imagination. So I wanted to race at Le Mans. So I've raced at Le Mans Classic. I wanted to race at Spa. So I've raced in the Spa 6 hours. I wanted to race at Daytona. So I've raced at the Classic Daytona 24 hour. I love the big rallies like Tour Auto and Tour de France. So I've done those in the current Patrick Peter event. So I tend to choose the kind of blue tick events I want to do.
Okay.
And the reason Goodwood's so special to me is that was my first exposure to seeing old cars racing back in '98. And when you watch those cars driving, unlike modern F1, they're moving around so much, they're exciting, they're visceral, they're noisy, they're smelly, you can get close to them, and there's just an element of drama and danger, and the whole atmosphere is special. And I think, and the cars are beautiful. And I think, therefore, I live in Surrey now, we were overseas, but it was a big goal of mine to race at Goodwood. So as soon as I could, I wanted to be part of that show. So Goodwood's a wonderful circuit, a great show, beautiful part of the country.
Yeah.
And equally, I then just pick and choose other events all around the world that I want to go and do.
And do you have to, do you have a team that then work with you to allow you to race at these places? Or, can someone who's just passionate and has the right car enter? I mean, how big do you have to be before you can enter something like that?
There's something for everyone, Lucy. So yeah, at the club level, you can turn up with your car on a trailer and spanner it yourself and race it, or you can run with a professional team. I've always chosen to go with the latter. I've chosen to run some pretty special and quick cars, which you need the skill sets for. And again, when you're at these big events, the level of preparation and standard now are incredibly high. 15 years ago, you'd turn up and it really was a low-level club event. These days, it's not far off semi-professional, the level. So I use 3 different teams, actually. I've got a team here called Lanzanti that run a couple of cars for me.
Okay.
In Petersfield, another team near Silverstone, another team down in the south of France at Paul Ricard.
Yeah.
So and they all run different cars, so that I can then turn up, it's prepared, they can run and support it. I can fly out again and they can fix it, and we can do it again the next weekend.
Fantastic. But there's obviously an element of risk when it comes to motor vehicles moving at fast speeds on tracks, etc. So, I mean, how does your family respond with you racing? Have you got that adrenaline now that you can deal with that stress of potential accidents? Have you ever been in a bad accident?
You're as someone who rides motorbikes, you're asking.
I haven't ridden them since I've had my child, because
Okay.
my level of risk changed after I had my son, and so I have yet to do a track day. My son's 5 now, but I still have all my leathers. Hopefully they
Yeah.
still fit, and I can get back out on the bike one day.
No, there's no doubt the first couple of years after having kids, my lap times dropped, and I think, but no, I've always approached it actually a bit like a business, really. You plan properly, and I have, again, a threshold. I only want to race cars that are well prepared and are safe. I don't race single seaters. To my mind, a single seater is too dangerous. I wouldn't race a motorbike. I love motorbikes, and I've had lots when I was younger, but even now I wouldn't want to ride one now. I just see too much risk.
Yeah.
So I tend to try and stick to GT and sports cars. I just feel they are a safer car. And then the biggest thing is preparation and training. So I put a lot of effort into just trying to keep fit, testing, and then you're building up. I do it for enjoyment. I'm not there to win anything. So we've done well in some events over the years, but the number one thing is a phrase that sticks in my mind with racing is the most successful race event is one where everyone gets to go home again on Sunday night, and that's really, to me, sums it up.
Yeah. And then obviously we're talking now back in yet another national lockdown, and COVID obviously changed the world, but I assume it also had an impact on racing and the events that you went to, and how did you find that the car industry and your own racing experience at times changed? What have you had to adjust to? I mean, I assume you're doing less racing at the moment.
I mean, last year was a fallow year. Everything just stopped, and so all I did last year was probably half a dozen track days just to keep dialed in, really.
Yeah.
This year I've got a fairly busy year planned, but God knows if it's going to happen. I think. So no, I think we're planning, and we're also having to deal with Brexit this year as well, which just makes logistics of moving cars around Europe a little bit more complex. But that'll sort itself out.
So Chris, jumping your mind back to your teenage days, what was the first car you ever bought?
First car was, I think, a Renault 5, which didn't last very long, got replaced by an Alfa Romeo 1.3 Ti. So that was the first one, but I was mainly into motorbikes then. So.
And then what would you say, you obviously have a number of cars now, but which one would you be most passionate about, or which one sort of really captures your heart with your current collection?
That's tough, because it's like kids, isn't it? I think I'm lucky enough to have a few, and different things talk to me in different ways. So I've got a Ford GT40 that I've done the most race. I've raced that now for about 12, 13 years, and I've raced that all over the world in all the best events you can. If it's possible, love a car. I love that car. It really is. And then an early Porsche, a 2.7 RS, which is to me a quintessential early car. And I've done 5,000 or 6,000 miles in that the last few years around France and the UK. And I just love it. It's an old car. It's a friendly car. Every time I go out in it, there's a conversation to have with people, and it's just so much fun to drive. And then at the kind of extreme end, I was really lucky a few years ago to be introduced to the Williams F1 team, the family there, and I was able to buy one of the cars out of the collection.
Oh wow!
So I've got a 1990 Williams FW13B Formula One car,
wow,
which is a fully running car, and it just gives me goosebumps. This car traveled the world in the red, in the sort of yellow, white, and blue colors. It's driven by Thierry Boots and Imperial, and it won the Hungarian GP in 1990. And I've driven that on a number of occasions at closed events, and it's just so extreme, because F1 was, like at most kids watching that as a teenager, was just so exciting, and I still can't believe I've got a Formula One car.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's very, very special. So I've got this big spectrum, I think.
I now have visions of your garage being like a James Bond garage with like vehicles moving up and around and all of that. Am I getting close?
Well, if I turn the camera around, my office does look out over a number of them, so it is all consuming. But I think, again, the beauty of it is that they also perform an artistic function.
Of course.
And I get as much joy from looking at things as I do from driving them.
Yeah, no, I completely get that. We once one of our motorbikes we had in the car in the house at one point, just because
Mm.
it's such beautiful. I think cars and bikes are beautiful in their own right as art. But Chris, you were talking earlier about sort of that you get into good routines with exercise and have that work-life balance so that you can do your passions and your hobbies. But COVID really has had a huge impact on the world, on people's financial status, on their mental health. I've seen that, it's affected me, it's affected my friends, my family, with people just feeling that life changed suddenly. So how do you keep on top of things in terms of your mindfulness? You mentioned exercise, but is there anything else you've done over this last year to help with that?
It's a good question. I think, I'm sure like yourself, we've got children at home homeschooling at the moment, and I think what's worked for us is structure.
Yeah.
We want to very much keep a structure, very much have a purpose in the day, very much have small goals that we can do within the confines of what we're allowed to. And I think I keep, was it Captain Tom who said, don't worry, there will be a better day coming. This will pass.
Yeah.
And I think we just need to be conscious of that. But I am very conscious that there's an enormous number of people who are stuck in difficult circumstances getting through this, and it is. I don't think there's any easier answers other than one has to put some structure and some discipline in it now more than ever. I mean, I insist on the kids being up at an early time, even though they're homeschooling. We insist on certain routines in the course of the day, and there has to be a difference between a weekday and a weekend, which my kids don't seem to agree with sometimes. Their pajamas are good enough for everything. But no, I look, it's a tough one, but I'm very fortunate individually. I'm a born optimist, and this will improve. And commercially, I think right now this is a wonderful time for businesses that are agile and can pivot. You can really steal the opportunity to set yourself now for the next phase. And certainly things I'm involved with at the moment are busier than they've ever been. They really are. So
that's really good to hear. So we're going to quickly go into a quick fire round question round. You haven't prepared for this, so you don't know it's coming. So don't worry too much about it. But basically, I'm going to say two words, or one or the other, and don't think about it too much. Just pick the word that you feel most drawn to. You can give me a reason why, or you can just say it. Okay? So for example, I might say cats or dogs, and you would say
dogs.
Okay, right, let's go. Morning or night?
Morning.
MotoGP or Formula One?
Formula One.
Netflix or party?
I'd love to go to a party.
Fish or chips?
Fish.
Lamborghini or Ferrari?
Ferrari.
Brad or Angelina?
That's a good question, isn't it? Angelina.
Rain or sun?
Sun.
Sea or swimming pool?
Sea.
Fast or slow?
Fast.
Porsche 911 Carrera RS 2.7 or Porsche 356?
2.7.
Sweet or savoury?
Sweet.
Eggs or bacon?
Eggs.
Sting or Prince?
Sting.
Gold or silver?
Gold.
Today or tomorrow?
Today.
Nice, thank you.
Where's that going?
Just to see what you think. No thought involved, just quick fire. What's your reactions? It's been interesting to hear all our guests and see the different answers that come from people. So Chris, it's been such a pleasure to speak to you today and hear about your life, your aspects of your career, and then of course your passion when it comes to cars. But for people listening in, what do you think it takes to succeed in life, in your passions, in your hobbies? What do you think you need to do to find that success?
I think, a couple of hackneyed phrases almost. I always remember the one, if you could somehow join the dots between your passion and your work, you'll never work a day in your life. And I love the challenge of business. To be frank, I'm as happy working as I am in a car with my family. I've never had a trouble there. And I think, but that's also because at one level personally, I've always had a calling I just feel this need to go and do something. And I think, my advice over the years to people who worked in the businesses I've been involved with has always been, you've got to go and try and find what that is. And that, I know that's the hardest piece. I think if you can find that calling, then the rest is easy. And I think the other piece, it's just, for me, everything's always been about the long term. I'm not a great sprinter, but I know mentally I can just keep plugging it out and finish a marathon. And I think that's where with most things here is you've got to be able to put the hard work in and grind things out and just stay focused, and it will come to you, because I've just found that most people just give up too easily. And so if you can just stay at it for longer than the rest, that alone is probably one of the biggest factors in success in so many cases.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think so too often we see, that image of the iceberg, and we see the tip of the iceberg being success, but we don't see the massive iceberg under the water that has built up over the years and years and years to create that success at the top. And I think with social media, with the world we are confronted with now, and the fact that we're all so much more isolated from each other, we constantly define our success on others. And I think what you just said was really resonated with me, that it's about the long, be the tortoise, not the hare, and you'll win the race and get there in the end.
Combination of that and somehow switching off from all the noise. There is so much noise out there, isn't there? And it's distracting. So yeah, I think stay focused, stay in it for the long term, and don't give up. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Chris. So for everyone listening, you must go and follow Chris, follow his journey when it comes to cars. He is, of course, on Instagram, and you can find him at Messing Around in Cars. He's also got his podcast of his own. So after you've listened to this one, go and subscribe to his. And that's, of course, Messing Around in Cars. So search for him on those two channels and find him and follow him. And Chris, thank you so much for joining me today to give me an insight into your world. It's been a pleasure to speak with you.
No, thank you, Lucy. All the best.
Thank you.
Bye.